Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media, where today we're going to be talking about the Senate Intelligence Committee.
This leaker, James Wolfe, from the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, as well as Daniel Jones, who was also a top aide for many years. He was the aide to Dianne Feinstein in the same committee. But Wolfe was caught, of course, having sex with a prostitute, a press person who's also a prostitute, for the sake of getting these leaks. But he also leaked to at least 4 others, which means he probably leaked to 40 others. And this is standard operating procedure, so much so that literally it was put up on the big screen, or whatever it was, HBO, the House of Cards show was telling us exactly what is going on. That is the way that it is.
Yes, it's very interesting. These shows are actually going in parallel with what's going on in the swamp.
Now, let me tell you something here to put it in perspective for all of our listeners. You probably heard me yelling and screaming about this early on, back in February of this year, when Newsweek put out an article, and it said that Mark Warner was trying early on, literally, it doesn't say it in the article, but we know that it's January of 2016, the first person to really get excited and contact Christopher Steele to get him on his dossier project, which was literally weeks after the now revealed truth, which only we were talking about, which has been found in the struck page text, which is the spies and the counterintelligence activity. The dossier was begun in 2015. It was realized in December 15th, and on December 28th is when Comey and the entire group of that, which has now become the Mueller investigation, but was also called the Secret Society, it was called Crossfire Hurricane, there were 2 different things going on, but they were coordinated between John Brennan, who started the counterintelligence as a front after it was already going on, and Comey, who's trying to hide behind William Priestap, who now says, he doesn't know anything about it. It was Andrew McCabe. And Andrew McCabe's saying, no, it was Peter Strzok. So now we have the only leak that we're going to see out of the worst attempted coup and the worst election meddling in U.S. history. All we're going to see is Andrew McCabe possibly get charged with a leak. Oh, but poor James Wolfe, an assistant to Richard Burr and Mark Warner, literally was involved in planning the dossier from the beginning with the complete awareness of the Gang of 8. But it was directed from the beginning, and it wasn't official until July, but before that it was being directed partially by Richard Burr, Mark Warner, Dianne Feinstein, and then the man who got charged with the leaks to the prostitute, James Wolfe. And now we know, because Daniel Wolfe, who was assistant to Dianne Feinstein.
You mean Daniel Jones?
Daniel Jones, who now runs a group that has been given $50 million to continue the work of Fusion GPS, because why? He was also helping coordinate the work of Fusion GPS, $12 million out of the Democratic National Committee. That would be John Podesta and Hillary Clinton, and he runs Penn Quarter Group. And we now know for a fact, because it was a testimony, and also this article I'm referring to came out of some text messages between Mark Warner, and that's what caused a lot of this to come to light. And then they punished James Wolfe, his assistant, for leaking. And I'm going to explain why, because in a minute we're going to talk about what those leaks were about and why he went down and he's going to jail. But Andrew McCabe, James Clapper, John Brennan, James Comey, the biggest leakers in U.S. history, may not even be tried for it, let alone, there may be no indictment against them, let alone a conviction or any jail time.
Oh, Thomas, that does not sound good.
I'm just telling you what's happening. Oh. So let me explain this so that maybe we can rectify this, because the news is coming out bit by bit. So Adam Waldman is the lawyer for Oleg Deripaska, the most notorious Russian oligarch, best friends of Putin. He controls aluminum. Look what Trump is doing to him. I always say that as part of his name. Oleg Deripaska, the aluminum giant. Look what Trump is doing to him. You see, because why? because they know full well what he did in the election. He has now put up part of the $50 million that was paid directly to Daniel Jones after he quit, the same job that James Wolfe basically had. He worked underneath James Wolfe, but directly for Dianne Feinstein on the Democratic side. But on the Republican side, it was stacked too. And so the Republican guy, actually the coordinator of all of it, James Wolfe, he got caught having sex, and then this woman revealed something that they did not want revealed. Now, mind you, the whole dossier thing went down. They all knew it. And Brennan briefed the Gang of Eight, which includes Richard Burr, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Rhino, Republican in name only, Devin Nunes, John McCain, I said Mitch McConnell. Anyway, there's a Gang of Eight plus 2 ex officios. Anyway, these 10 people were informed about this fake dossier from the beginning. So this is the way that it works, folks. The Republicans in the Senate, working with the Democrats and their crooked intelligence staffers.
Okay, wait a minute. The Republicans in the Senate working with the Democrats in the Senate.
In the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, it had been weaponized against Trump for Hillary. It was the source of the Russian contacts. It was where the Russian spy, Oleg Deripaska, is not even really much acting like a spy. He's using his operatives, Daniel Jones. He used other operatives, and they basically, from the beginning, as we told you, and we're the only ones who told you this, that from January of 2016, there was the plan. And the plan was in coordination with John Brennan, James Comey, and at that time, remember, there's been 3 heads of the FBI counterintelligence department. But forget that. It was Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe, for 10 years, ran the program to keep the Russian theft of U.S. uranium away from public eyes, and that's the whole thing with CFIUS, and that's why they blame Hillary for getting $145 million from the members of Rosatom's owned Uranium One board members. And so this is all true. We've talked all about this, but the point is that this, what we're pointing out now, is going to blow your mind when I tell you the truth of the matter. Because almost everyone in the whole America, especially the revolution, is saying, yay, they're taking down James Wolfe for being a leaker. Ha! Incorrect. You need to look at what he leaked, and then you'll understand what happened. They had to take him down and make him look so bad and make him do, a plea deal because remember, how many leaks was it that he gave out? They gave out the names of 5 of the people, one he was having a 3-year-long sex relationship with. What we're talking about is as ridiculous as George Papadopoulos being set up by Stephen Halper and having sex with his friend's assistant, and sex with a girl he thought was Putin's niece. We're talking about stupidity upon stupidity. So what these people do is beyond imagination, because we're all kind of stupid in some way at some time. So poor James Wolfe, he gets the whole burden on this, but I got to explain the backdrop for this.
Okay, I'm all ears. I'm in it.
You've never heard me say these things,
I know. I said, don't tell me. I want to hear firsthand.
You see, if you'd let me come over for more cheesecake, and if you had that special cappuccino that I like.
You think you're my only boyfriend?
No, holy God, I got to take a number when I come over here. Are you kidding me?
When Michael McKibben comes over, we roll out that red carpet.
Oh, Lordy, when Michael McKibben comes over, we're all treated like kings and queens. When Lord McKibben arrives, us lower esquires.
Okay, we digress. Let's get back.
Okay, but this is so important. Hang on to your hats. The conclave just figured this out this morning. Devin Nunes, at the same time, honestly, openly sent his intelligence representative to meet with Christopher Steele, and they refused to meet with him. At the same time that Christopher Steele is begging to meet with Mark Warner, but he says, I want Richard Burr, the head of the Senate committee, to send me a letter so I have a paper trail, so I won't get into a legal mess. And Richard Burr says, no, I can't do that, but please come. And when he wouldn't, they sent James Wolfe and others, and this isn't even in the stories, but we know this, they sent multiple representatives to Christopher Steele to say, please, please tell us what's in your dossier. It wasn't created yet. Comey was only setting it up. We told you that it had to be set up for months before. They sprung it in early spring accidentally and in July.
What? Spring
2016.
Okay.
And then later in July and later in August. And then they still didn't get the warrant for doing what they were doing with Carter Page until October, which shows they were using that warrant to spy on a duly elected president-elect. And then later, it's part of a coup.
Whoa.
The only reason that they would ever need that warrant is to cover their tracks for what they'd already done and to make the coup legal. And it did become legal because you got to remember, it had many names. Crossfire Hurricane all the way to Mueller investigation. There's 12 names they had. Secret Society, the Committee to Impeach, the Trump Operation, the small group, the interagency group. Remember, and this is new, out of recent testimony, it has been found that Andrew McCabe authored the joint analysis of Russian meddling in the election. And I told everyone from the beginning, there was no work ever done on that. They took a previous report, which they'd been gathering for 5 years to create what we've told you to read, which is the intelligence report on the paradox of progress. And all he did is rewrite it and add one sentence saying that the Democratic National Committee was hacked. And that's why that report didn't hold any weight. So at the same time, Andrew McCabe was looking into the emails and rewriting Comey's exoneration in April before she was even interviewed. Andrew McCabe did this. Andrew McCabe also went and met with Stephen Halper to make sure the frame-up of George Papadopoulos was coordinated through Sergei Milian, and that the Trump Tower mythology that there is a server connected to the Alpha Bank and 3 Russian oligarchs, that had to be set up, and that was long before July and long before it came out in October. So we have told you the timeline. Go back to our article, 28 Treasonous Crimes of Comey, and you will see the true timeline, which is now becoming revealed, and even President Trump revealed and made a comment about it in his tweets, which we talked about in our decoding the other day, that he said, oh my, this goes all the way back to 2015 when the spies were assigned. I'm going to tell you the spies again. And someday we're going to get these spies.
And folks, as always, when we talk about articles, you can go down to the description box, grab those things and read them. And for you people in the European Union, you better grab your links now while they're cheap.
Most people want to start off with the informant, because he's not a spy, according to James Clapper and John Brennan and Comey. No. He's an informant. And they act like putting an informant in the opposite team's election is okay, in framing George Papadopoulos, attempting to frame Sam Clovis, attempting to frame Paul Manafort, framing General Flynn, framing Michael Cohen, framing Carter Page. Remember, Carter Page, and then we're going to come back to this. You're going to say, well, when is he going to come back to the big drop? The big drop is coming in a minute. But without this, you cannot understand the big drop. So when I name the spies, it's not going to start off with Stephen Halper, who has been a long time paid over $1 million for all his lies that he's provided for every agency, from the State Department, FBI, Justice Department. It's all been lies. He's been a paid liar since he worked with presidents. He is a money fixer. He owned 3 crooked banks. Those banks run the Iran-Contra money through them. Palmer Bank, George Washington Bank, fake banks that run money for Washington politicians, literally in D.C. or Virginia. This guy is as crooked as he could possibly be. No. I'm not going to say that, because now we know that Strzok went over and met with him. Oops, that means Comey, Andrew McCabe, William Priestap, and Strzok are all guilty of being spies, not informants. And they weren't just getting an informant to see if they could frame George Papadopoulos, to see if there was Russian collusion to get the 33,000 Hillary emails when they were sitting in James Comey's office the entire time, Christopher Wray tells us through his recent testimony. There was no missing 33,000 text messages from Hillary, emails from Hillary. Comey always had them, both on a USB drive, which Christopher Wray has now testified. Well, how come they're not being looked at, Christopher Wray? How come Imran Awan's about ready to skip the country with the plea deal, and you haven't looked into the largest espionage case that the President of the United States, through his text messages, has told you to look into?
Well, that's because he's senior executive service operative.
Correct. So I'm going to name the spies, and it goes like this. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Valerie Jarrett, Susan Rice, Loretta Lynch. Eric Holder was in on this also as an advisor. So was Robert Mueller as an advisor from the early stages, an advisor to James Comey. And all of their subordinates. And so we can go that direction, or we can go the other direction with Felix Sater, who was already he's a Russian. His dad is the New York representative for one of the most powerful oligarchs in Russia. He was Comey's spy that he sent into the Trump camp again and again. He even tried to set up Michael Cohen with a fake letter saying that they had a meeting saying there was going to be sanctions for Russia that Michael Cohen had promised, and that's why Michael Cohen was getting billions of dollars and he was going to Prague, which he never did, and why the DNC hack was in fact to make Hillary look bad. And that's the whole thing. The whole hack of the DNC, wrong. That's not what it was about. It wasn't a hack. It was a breach, and what was in those breaches, only part of it went to WikiLeaks. Only part of it. The other part was George Soros and the corruption and the implementation of the plan, the template to win the election created in a crooked fashion through U.S. Digital Service. All that's in that server. And as Trump points out, the Imran Alwan server, which are multiple servers, sir. There's the one that was in Becerra's office. There's the one that was in the shack. There's the one that was in Pakistan. And we paid for all of them. And the receipts are there. And he stole them. And the Inspector General brought these charges against him. And Jeff Sessions did nothing about it. And even Christopher Wray did nothing about it. And is still doing nothing about it. Why? They wanted that to happen. It's part of the narrative that came out of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee being coordinated by James Comey, with the help of those people I've mentioned. And of course, that would be James Baker, Strzok, Page Orr, Nellie Orr, Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS, Daniel Jones, all those people. That was a giant conspiracy. John Podesta, Perkins Coie, Elias, whatever his name is, the lawyer.
Mark Elias.
And then the other ones, Natalia Veselnitskaya, which the State Department had to bend over backwards to bring her in. And there's Renat Oksmesnat, or whatever his name is, who is Hillary's Russian friend, who they tried to set him up with. Then there's Franklin Forer. So there's a lot of spies. But now you got the background. You got that it's coming and going. There's Joseph Mifsud, who in London, both in Rome and in London, most of this happened in London. Christopher Steele said, I'll meet with your entire intelligence committee if you come to London, because Sir Richard Dearlove, who was the ex-head of the MI6, is my boss, and he's telling me what to do. And he's saying I could get in big trouble unless I release this the right way so it gets a lot of press. Because he's also friends with Sir Geoffrey Patty, and this was a political attempt to bring down the president through a scandalous document which Strategics Communications Limited, the mother company of Cambridge Analytica, always does. That's what they do. They mess up elections through fraud, through extortion, through sexual scandals. And now they've been caught. They've gone bankrupt. And the two companies here in America, Cambridge Analytica and SCL USA, both have gone bankrupt because they say Trump used them. Trump barely used them. There was already a system he was fighting.
Well, whatever they blame him on, they really are doing themselves. If it's Russia, it's because they've got relationships with Russia.
We now know that the Gang of Eight, except for Devin Nunes, who honestly and publicly sent agents to Christopher Steele to say, do you have a dossier? Long before Christopher Steele met with those 5 major media outlets, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNN, Yahoo News, the criminal ones. He met with them. He briefed them. He was never supposed to give them the document. BuzzFeed made it visible and made it available to the public, the whole document, which showed from the first line. First line says, Donald Trump has been controlled by Russia for the last 5 years and is one of their major agents. I mean, that's like the first line of the dossier. Who would even read on? Who would even read on such shallowness? So the deal is, they all knew about the dadgum dossier, and Devin Nunes is the only person fighting it. One of the only people fighting it. Now, there are other people, Goodlate and Grassley and others, Meadows and Gate and Jim Jordan and all these other people, even sometimes Trey Gowdy looks like he's on our side. They fight this, but it's only Devin Nunes who's hanging on. And they kicked him off for ethics problems to try to get him out of the mix. Because why? The Gang of Eight are guilty, we now know, because of the testimony of William Priesthap.
Could they all be arrested for treason? these
At
people?
this point, it is looking as such.
Okay. Wow.
And what I'm about to tell you is the
Who would
joke of
arrest
it all.
them for treason? Who would actually go in there and put them in handcuffs and walk them out?
There would have to be a state of emergency, which there is. There might have to be another state of martial law or military emergency based upon certain acts of crime that he would have to send through certain courts, both military and
Well, wait a minute. One
federal.
time we talked about that Donald Trump is really the sheriff, so to speak, of Washington, D.C.
Well, let's talk about that show we were watching, Homeland. The female president, they tried to assassinate her. And so she arrests hundreds of people, and they're all top dogs in Congress and everywhere else because she says, I'm sorry, this is a conspiracy. And it friggin' was. And then after a while, she gives up because she can't fight and win against the intelligence community. That's what the show teaches us. And it's like, oh my gosh, that is real time. But Trump is winning. And even though, who was it, Schumer, who said you can't fight the intelligence community, they have 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you. Yes, Mr. Schumer, we know you're in the Gang of 8, and you are, of course, in the Intelligence Committee ex officio. So you are, in fact, complicit with the dossier crimes, the Pfizer warrant crimes, the attack on the election meddling, an attack on the president-elect, an attack on a duly elected president sitting with a regime overthrow, a George Soros color revolution. And in a minute, after I tell you the scam of this leak prosecution, I'm going to tell you what's really going on.
But before you go there, I did ask a question, and I want to get that one wrapped up. So you said that there might have to be another type of emergency for Washington?
He can write an executive order that simply activates the 13 executive orders that Obama had set up for Hillary so that she could basically, with the signature, take over everything in America.
Ooh, that's heavy. Okay, go on.
They set him up. It's just like the internet.
I know. We
They've
all
set
saw
up this
that.
weapon, and now we are using the weapon against them. They set up Trump. They set up Hillary to be the weapon of all weapons against the American democracy and true republic and our true U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights.
They would have used that weapon against us in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. We have the proof because it was all set up
Right.
there. All you have to do is look at it. There was nothing Obama did not touch, just like the current Pope, that he did not defile. The Pope, no dogma, no doctrine has not been defiled. And in America, no law has not been defiled by our ex-president who needs to be impeached so that I can call him his true name, Barry Soetoro, since he did not file that he had any aliases or AKAs, otherwise known as, and he had 7. So that alone makes him ineligible for even running as a president. He also used a fake birth certificate.
Okay, let's go back to the main point.
Which wasn't a certificate. It was a Hawaiian certificate of live birth, which anybody could create. Okay, where are we at? Here's the punchline, folks. Poor James Wolfe. Sure, he had sex for 3 years, but that's not consolation enough for the fact that he knows that every one of his bosses told him to leak that information. If you do not think that leaks from those high-level committees are institutionalized, you're silly. Now, what's probably pretty cool is we should look him up and see if he's SES. They probably are getting him because he's not SES, so that they can fire him without a fight. They're going to have a fight with Andrew McCabe. So what did he reveal? What was it? What he revealed is that when I was back in the old days, like I was a minute ago, getting really worked up and kind of yelling because certain writers would say they had inside information where they revealed stuff that was so wonderful for the resistance against the evil shadow government, the SES, and really the deep state on an international level. We would get really worked up. So when the article came out that said that Carter Page had been used by the FBI and CIA as an agent, a paid agent, to work against Russians and brought them to prosecution, and so the case could be looked at. So we looked at the case and we could find out, oh my gosh, this was real. Carter Page took these stupid binders of a program that he wrote and gave them to top Russian crooked agents in America who were part of the some of them part of the diplomatic corps, some of them not. Some of them faking they were part of the diplomatic corps. Doesn't matter. They put a bug in all of the spines of those binders, and they went all the way back to Russia, to the group that was actually directing the spies in the Russian diplomatic agents in America. Now, mind you, go back to what we've said before. There is no Russian in this country that is not a spy, that is a diplomatic agent. One would have to be extremely naive, and I am using nice words. Very naive to assume otherwise. So they called the Russians, they have him on tape, and they call Carter Page a useful idiot. They thought they were using him. He didn't know he was using them because he didn't know they were being wiretapped. But he was being used by the...
he was just a mule.
He was just like Felix Sater. He was a criminal that they said, okay, we won't put you in jail if you be a criminal for us and help us in these criminal setups of Russians. So no crime would have been committed had Carter Page not been inserted, except that crimes were always going on. But anyway, they used him. Okay, so then it came out that the Russians were prosecuted. And then it came out that he was the witness. And then it came out that Carter Page, who everyone calls a wackadoodle, a complete idiot, who somebody used his name and a report that he had written. I think it might have been the very same report they gave to the Russians in these binders. They used that report to say, yes, he's a member of the Trump team for, advisors. Well, he never met with Trump, never spoke with Trump, and once they realized he was a wackadoodle, they kicked him out. He kept going back because he was by then being paid by Comey, again, as an insert, as a spy, as an informant in the Trump team, but he couldn't get close. They actually put a personal protection order on Trump and said, Trump's team took it out on Carter Page and said, if you come near us, we'll put you in jail. Then Carter Page, along with Felix Sater, who was another person just like this, who was a criminal, who was a Russian, who was inserted into the Trump team quite some time ago when Trump was selected years ago as being a possible candidate. Felix Sater was a setup of the Comey, at that time, the Mueller and later Comey, a setup to go after Trump to get him to have some Russian collusion so they could get some dirt on him before he would ever run for president. Because Roger Stone had already pointed out that he could be president in 2000, and a lot of other people had said it, and many people had said it before. And then when the Paradox of Progress came out and said that a nationalist who was basically a pseudo-isolationalist, who was very right, and who was a businessman and a capitalist who could use the words Islamic terrorism, would win. And they predicted him. And so when people saw this, General Flynn and others, they came and got Trump. So anyway, they knew this long ago. So the Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee with Adam Schiff, is an idiot. He's an idiot. He wrote his report that countered Nunes, and the entire thing had to be redacted.
He's the one that probably, this is just my feeling, that told the what's his name, Wolf, that told Wolf to leak.
He's a gang of 8, and 2 Russian spoofers called him up, and he was willing to do whatever it took, because they were spoofing him, saying they had dirt on Trump, and he was willing to say, I'll do whatever I have to do to get it. This is the head. This is one of the gang of 8 that is held with the most secret of all intelligence, top secrets in America. These idiots will literally fall for somebody calling up saying they're calling from Russia and make a deal with them over the phone to get dirt. But then they set up Trump and Donald Jr. and Jared and Manafort through Felix Sater and through Rob Goldstein and through Renat and through Natalia and through all of them, and bringing in, of course,
and don't forget Dianne Feinstein's relationship with Daniel Jones.
Oh, I'm going back.
Okay.
All Hannigan, Robert Hannigan, who resigned 3 days after Trump got elected because he was the NSA British equivalent, came to Fort Meade and spied on the Natalia meeting with the Trump team, which the State Department had to allow 3 of those people to come into this country because they were on the no enter. They created a special visa just for them so that they could trap Trump. So what I'm telling you is, we were right. December 2015 is when all this started. Multiple spies were already put in place, and the dossier, remember, had these elements in it. Michael Cohen's a spy. General Flynn's a spy. Carter Page is a spy. Later, they added George Papadopoulos as a spy. That Trump is a spy and has been a spy for 5 years for the Russians. that they have compromising information on Trump. That's the reason he's a spy, that he's being paid by 3 Russian oligarchs through Alpha Bank, through the Trump Tower server, that's receiving money every single day. That was the Franklin 4R Slate article, which was fake, which even Comey, the day afterwards, came out and said, "Shut up, Franklin 4R. I told you not to do this anymore. I stopped paying you because it's already been disproven." But Franklin 4R spent hundreds of thousands of dollars getting experts throughout America for 6 months to verify that the Trump Tower server was real, and then Comey poo-poos it the day after he reports it. Because why? He needed his dossier. He needed the Carter Page dossier to get through the FISA court. But the FISA court was going through an Inspector General investigation, which in December of that year stated that they were in complete noncompliance, both the CIA, the NSA, and especially the FBI, and especially the FBI counterintelligence. And that's the reason it took them from December of 2015 until October of 2016 to get that FISA court warrant. But during that time, Comey committed at least 28 treasonous crimes, which we name, and you can go back and you can get those. And what was being revealed was the Senate Intelligence Committee, which everybody calls the compromised Senate Intelligence Committee, because Mark Warner was compromised because he tried to get in contact with Steele. Adam Schiff was compromised because he tried to get in contact with Putin's people over a phone call. Dianne Feinstein was compromised because she gave out the behind closed doors testimony of Glenn Simpson from Fusion GPS to try to get ahead of the narrative, and then she quit. And then Daniel Jones quit, and then he went off and got $50 million to continue the work of Fusion GPS because Christopher Steele had been compromised because he's an idiot and because he gave BuzzFeed a full copy of the dossier. And so the whole dossier, which was completely complicit and known about by the Gang of Eight, which means the top members of the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee, they were all compromised except for Devin Nunes, who honestly told the whole world by sending publicly representatives to Christopher Steele to say, "What are you talking about? Give me a copy of this." Because Brennan wouldn't give him a copy. He just told him it existed. They didn't give Trump a copy. But the day after, Clapper did and didn't reveal and did and didn't reveal to Tapper. He says now 6 times he's changed the story. He did or he didn't reveal. And now he says, of course I revealed it because it was out in the news. Why? Because they revealed it through James Wolfe type of institutionalized leaking, which not only goes on in the Intelligence Committee, but goes on in the Department of Defense, goes on in the Department of Justice, goes on in the FBI, especially the FBI Counterintelligence Department, which we know now from struck page messages that there were so many leaks that they talk about it commonly, and they talk about groups of leaks, and then they laugh about how quickly the leaks get out. But none of those people have been charged with leaks. That would be Comey, Baker, Strzok, Page, or any of them. None of them. Only Andrew McCabe. Why? Because Andrew McCabe committed so many crimes, they actually technically need him in jail and shut up, or to do a plea deal so he doesn't tell the truth on the Uranium One deal. Because that's also what the Senate Intelligence Committee had to close a blind eye to.
Well, and Jeff Sessions is also complicit in all of this.
Sessions was on 3 committees that the CFIUS committee had to have the approval of to get Uranium One done. And the Senate Intelligence Committee knew that for 10 years, Andrew McCabe had been carrying on an investigation allowing 12 Russian spies to come into this country so that Putin's Rosatom company in America called Tenam, ran by Vidam Midikin, who went to jail, and the guy who testified against him, William Douglas Campbell, wants to testify to the world, but he had a gag order put on him by Mueller, and through the work of Andrew McCabe. For 10 years, they allowed them to extort, perhaps kill, but certainly to rip off every nuclear power plant that they sold uranium to after enriching it in our enrichment plants. They bought our uranium, they enriched our uranium, or they brought over the uranium from their depleted missiles called megatons to megawatts in the 20 years before that, and then the Bush family, the Clinton family got their cut out of the group called U.S. Enrichment Corporation. Look into that. We've talked about it a lot. The point is that the corruption is so thick that now we know for a fact that the dossier was completely known all about since the time they started planning it and creating it in January of 2016 by the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Gang of Eight.
Okay, all of this is so overwhelming, and I want to frame something that can be positive, and that is this. All of this that you explained, plus other things that we have explained in other audios of what was going on with the U.S. Digital Service and Eric Schmidt and Facebook to rig the election, plus the whole man-in-the-middle scheme that they had going, right? And so it's just overwhelming. But folks, really, Hillary Clinton did not get elected. And that says a lot about patriots in America. You got off your butts and you went to the polls and you voted for Trump. Now, Trump is our leader, and we need to get behind him, because it's only going to be with a singular voice and a singular vision that we're going to be able to take this down. Because all these people are hiding behind their rogue government, their weaponized government that is trying to take down the United States of America. We need to be very solid in our support for Donald Trump. We need to read his tweets daily. We need to listen to what he's saying. And when they go out and do the polls, we want these pollsters to be blown away with how much support the American people are giving him. Because if we have his back, he can get the job done faster than if we're all scurrying around.
And it's exactly as you said. The reason we are winning, and it is hopeful, is because, I'll say in a minute, but we are putting pressure. Donald Trump is putting pressure, continuous pressure on who? On the senior executive service, on the shadow government, who does what? They can outlast everybody. They go on for generations. Their pressure always goes in the direction of the way that it always goes. There's no decisions being made. They're told what to do. They have a union. They make no decisions. They're told what to do. They don't even know why they do what they do. And that's what happened with poor James Wolfe. He was doing what he was told to do, and now he's going down the drain, but he's going down the drain because he had sex with somebody. He didn't have sex with the other 4 reporters, so they didn't get him for that. They got him for an indiscretion, and he can't not admit indiscretion. That is called blackmail. That is what the FBI does. It's what it's always done. It's what the CIA does. It's their job. It's what the deep state does. It's what they hold as their pressure controls to make sure everything flows in their direction. So we, just like Betsy said, have to keep up the pressure. We have to reelect people like Devin Nunes, like Jim Jordan, like Meadows, like Gates, like Grassley, like Goodley.
Well, listen to Trump's tweets. If he recommends that we should be voting a certain way, at least for the time being, we need to give him the players that he wants in Congress.
And we don't let up on not letting a Comey and a Mueller and a McCabe get away with their sins, with their crimes. These are horrible crimes. They are as bad as I'm saying, and much worse, because remember, they committed them consciously. And it is evil. And they meant to commit evil. If you don't think that Andrew McCabe knew he was committing crimes with his wife, Jill McCabe, and the gifts of money out of the Hillary Victory Fund to her campaign when they knew she wasn't going to win, and now they sit on that money, you see, she's going to run again. And so these are tricks. This is the way of greed. This is the way of the 7 deadly sins. And so it's easy to catch these people because they follow the same old paths that the devil has followed since the beginning of time.
We want more now. We're ready to catch them and put them in jail while they await their public trials.
James Wolfe is a scapegoat for the deep state's leaks. There are 26 other cases. That was the 27th case. There are 27. We're 27. There's now 26 other current cases against leakers. Those 26 are sealed. The case with James Wolfe did not leak. Notice that. The case against Trump leaks every single day. If it leaked, it would be invalid and they couldn't prosecute James Wolfe. They did not leak. They haven't leaked the others. So who are the others they're going after? I can only hope. But the point is, we have to keep the pressure up. We have to use consciousness to become the critical mass that changes the way people think so that then the truth can be spoken out loud. And that's what we're talking about. This is nothing more than speaking the truth out loud.